The key is getting value in your B2B relationship as the client.
The Golding Group Strategic Growth Podcast, formerly known as the Neo Marketing Podcast, offers real-world advice, expert analysis, and smart success strategies for entrepreneurs, investors, decision makers, and business leaders.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Strategic Growth Podcast. My name is Kyle Golding. This is my co-host, Pritch Pritchard, APR and fellow PRSA. How are you today, Pritch?
I'm doing all right. I'm still vertical.
Yeah, well, got a little bit of a bang up, got a little brace going on your arm there, but everything else okay for you right now?
Not broken, just badly bent.
The good news is that your mouth is good.
Yes.
We can have a conversation here on the podcast.
Nobody will ever shut that up.
That's right. They will never stop us from talking on this podcast.
About strategic stuff.
That's right, about being very strategic. So recently I saw this on a social media post. It was a nugget of an idea that I've expanded upon. The nugget was that no one is ever taught how to be a good client.
Oh, okay. Right.
So, and we're in the B2B space. We deal with clients on a regular basis that are business owners and decision makers, et cetera, right? So I got to thinking about how can we help our B2B clients be better clients?
Absolutely.
Right? But at the same time I started making my notes for this, I realized that the advice I would give for how to be a good client is also the advice I would give for how to be a good service provider.
Yeah, right.
Whether you're the B in the B2B or the B in the other B,
the other B in the
first
B2B.
B or the second B
Right.
in that combination, this advice goes for you.
Yeah, perfect.
And so we have four kind of key points here that I'll break down into detail. Focus, honesty, expectations, communication, and the fifth one, the bonus, partnership.
All right. AKA collaboration.
That's right. Very much collaboration for creating partnership. And partnership, I'll give you some details as to why I specifically chose that term.
Yep. Okay.
So start right off the top with focus.
Focus.
Right? And when you're in a business relationship, there are hundreds of ways you can do it, but you need to focus on, obviously, what is the most important way, the single most important action or point of focus that you need to connect with your service provider as the client or as the provider.
Right.
So when you're a client, you're going to ask your B2B provider for something specific. Consulting, strategic consulting, for marketing, for public relations, for insurance, for accounting, etc., right?
Right.
Whatever it is you're asking for, you need to start with what's the most impactful thing that I need from that service provider. What do I need the Golding Group to do for me? What do I need the CPA to do for me? What do I need my lawyer to do for me? That is the most important thing. It's where you start and where every conversation should go back to in your business relationship.
Yep. So what's the most important need that needs to be satisfied?
Correct, right? You obviously have to do the thing most important because then there are other things in your business connected and associated with that core tenet. Right. So if your service providers are providing you all the things that they're supposed to do, your strategic planners are helping you there, your marketing folks are helping you, your legal and your HR teams, if you use someone for hiring and things of that nature, your legal team, anyone that you've hired to do something, if they're playing their role specifically and not, 50 things for the lawyer, that's too expensive.
Right.
But the one or two things that are most important, the most focus you could put on it, that way they provide the best value for you. And so the key is getting value in your B2B relationship as the client.
And you do that with focus.
If you ask your service provider for 50 things, they can't provide you 50 things at high value. It's too much. Even 5 different items at different value won't have the same value. You need to have your most valuable thing first, the thing that has the most impact on your business. And then from there, because there are connected and related issues and topics and things systems and processes that come along with it, you can trickle down into those things eventually, understanding that if it doesn't go back to that core focus, then it's not creating enough value for you. Remember, you're paying for this service.
Right.
You've budgeted for us, for not just money, but time, effort, attention, focus, all of that. So keeping focused on what it is you need from the service provider makes you a good client.
Well, I would expand that just a little bit, Kyle, and say that your focus is embedded in your mission statement.
It should be.
Should be.
Yes.
Yeah. So if you're scratching your head now, listening to this or watching this, going, well, how do I focus? I'd go to your mission statement.
What is the most important thing you do?
What's the most important thing you do?
Why do you exist? What's the most important thing? What's your core tenet?
Yep.
Your mission statement, your core values. What is your primary product or service?
Yep.
And then how do your service providers, because you're the client, they're the service providers, how do they support that?
Absolutely.
And
you go.
Where do you start? With the service provider that can support that core idea the best and the most impactful.
Yeah.
Because everything else flows from there.
Absolutely.
You know, if you're in manufacturing, then you have to have the widget, if you will,
right.
And you have to get that widget to market, and you have to get audience, and you have to get sales process, all of that stuff. So you don't need to focus on your marketing and sales if the manufacturing isn't happening.
Right.
You have to have the thing before you can sell the thing.
Right.
If you have manufacturing down, you can now work into marketing, sales, then accounting. You don't need accounting until you have your first sale,
right,
et cetera. So focus. Now flip it though. When you're the service provider,
right,
same thing. A client can ask you for 50 things.
Right.
What you need to do to be a good service provider, to have the best relationship with your client, is to help them focus on the most impactful item.
The most important thing.
When the client says, I need you to do these 50 things, your response needs to be, we need to prioritize and start with what's most important.
Right.
It makes it so that you can deliver value to them, they can receive the value. So that's the two-way relationship on focus for provider and client.
Well, and I think that focus on the part of the service provider is maybe more important than the focus on the client.
Yes.
Because, you should be the one advising your client on what's the most important thing given their mission, given their particular concerns.
And a good amount of what we do when we have a new client, and sometimes kind of reminding our current clients, is you need to stay focused.
Got to stay focused.
Yes, we get a call. We have a cup of coffee with someone, and they say, "Okay, so here's what I want to do."
Yeah.
And like, I need this and 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 this, right? And then, like, okay. The next question, of course, is what's the most important thing?
Right.
What has the most impact? What is the most connected? What can we solve? What problem can we solve that then starts to solve the other problems associated with it, as opposed to a hodgepodge of, let's just do whatever, right?
Right. And as we've said many, many times on this podcast, research is step number one.
Yes.
And so is the service provider understanding, based on your research, based on your history with the client, is where that advice becomes invaluable.
And as the service provider, offering that focus to a client who's unfocused is a value add.
Absolutely.
Now, value add's a term we're going to hit many times today. I want to make sure I got it in early because we're going to have a conversation about value add several times today.
Okay,
so
cool.
As the provider, if you want to go from being an okay provider to a great, trusted member of the team, a collaborator, a partner in your partnership, which is where we'll end today, then adding the additional value, that counsel and advice of don't try to do 50 things, try to do 2 things, start here and work out from here.
Right.
As the service provider, that helps you. As the client, listen to that advice.
Right.
Let your partners, your service providers, help you focus, because focus is number one.
Number one.
Started there intentionally for sure. The second item on the list is honesty.
Okay.
Now, it sounds easy.
This should be a given.
It sounds easy, right? But some people get really, really kind of up in their head and uptight about sharing everything with everyone.
Right.
Now, we're not talking about sharing with the world. You don't have to show the entire world your process and how you do things and the secret sauce, of course, right? But if you have a specific service provider who is part of that thing, again, is it manufacturing, is it marketing, is it accounting, is it HR? You do have to share with them a lot of information that you wouldn't share with the general public, and you absolutely don't want your competitors to have, but you're professionals.
Right.
Now, you can go the route of getting your non-disclosure agreements and all the legal things lined up, and that's fine, and you should. I'm not discouraging that. Go and get those things done.
Right.
But having an attitude of holding back and not being completely honest as the client to the provider just handcuffs the provider, doesn't allow them to provide all of the insight and professional advice and experience that they can provide for you. So you're sort of only getting 75 or 80% of your provider if you are holding information back for them.
Right.
And as the provider, and I say this all the time too, when I'm like, oh yeah, I would love to have a conversation with you. If you would like that non-disclosure agreement, here it is. But I can tell you, and we sign them and we give them because we like to stay compliant. But it's more important for me, for clients to understand that if I were to go out and put your information out in the world,
right,
I were to tell people like, oh, you know how they do this, and you know the secret sauce behind this, and you know there's good and bad happening behind the scenes that y'all don't know, but I do because I work with them. That would be the end of our business.
Absolutely.
So honesty in the relationship of you can trust me with the information. You can trust me with all of the information.
Right.
And then the flip side now, as a service provider, right? You can't just tell people what they want to hear.
Absolutely
They
right.
need the honesty, and they need brutal honesty.
There's too many yes people out there.
That's right. Now, too many people think brutal honesty means hurting people's feelings and being really aggressive. That's not what I'm saying at all.
Nope.
Because that's in your delivery. That's in the tact.
Right.
But telling them what they need to hear, even if it isn't, or especially if it isn't what they want to hear,
right,
is the key, because your business is not going to survive on positive feelings and not hurting anyone's ego.
Group hugs and
your
kumbaya.
Business is going to survive off real world facts.
Yep.
You mentioned research earlier, right? The reason we do the research is it's not about our opinion. It's not about who makes the decision. Right. It's not about whose idea it is. The research, the data, what does your audience want? What will the market bear? What are the factors that can go into success is more important than who thought of it or
right.
make the CEO happy, or even worse, make the CEO's spouse or best friend happy because,
Mrs. Admiral.
Exactly. So brutal honesty that is constructive and beneficial in both ways.
Yep.
So as a client, if you want to be a good client, be honest, open, provide as much information to your service provider as necessary. Whatever they ask for, provide it to them. If they are professionals, and if you've done a good job of vetting them and understanding them before you hire them, put your legal documents in place to protect you as well, and then give them all the information and access they need in order to give you all of the services they can provide you. That's why you hired them.
Right.
As a service provider, no yes man, no kissing up,
right.
No butt kissing.
No butt kissing.
Honest, unvarnished truth along with the advice and your professional insights to what to do with it based on research and analysis and real world factors creates the potential for success through the roof, as opposed to hoping that you got it right.
Right.
Hope is not a strategy.
And as a client, being truthful is extremely important, not just so that you get the best service, but so that you don't waste your precious resources.
Exactly, yeah.
I was trying to think of an example and I can't off the top of my head, but you walk down this path, you spend money and time and effort to get a certain perspective out of the service provider, and then you go, oh yeah, by the way, we tried that 2 years ago and it didn't work.
Exactly.
You've just wasted all that time.
We've tried that before. We've tested it, or we have some data that tells us that this doesn't happen. Yep. Well, if you'd have told me that from the beginning,
we wouldn't have been down this path.
Or we've done a cost analysis, or there's a legal issue, or even especially if we had legal problems before.
Right.
A lot of people may I don't want to discuss our legal problems, but your service provider might provide you advice and insights that you won't be able to use because they don't know about that information unless you honestly provide it.
Right. Bada bing.
So we have focus and we have honesty. Now, the next thing that we need to be very clear on are the expectations.
Yep.
And this is where the conversation should start. As a client, if you want to be a good client in a B2B relationship, make your expectations known up front.
Right. Oh, and by the way, getting on the front page of the New York Times or curing cancer.
Right.
Probably not realistic. Well, the front page of the New York Times, but you're not going to like how you get there.
It depends on what you're talking about. If you're curing cancer, you can get on the front page of the New York Times.
Right.
How you cure cancer is a completely different conversation. Or if you are simply starting something that's a franchise of an existing brand, right? Hey, opened a Subway up on down the corner here.
Right.
I like front page of the New York Times. That expectation is out of whack.
It is
completely. But it begins with the client.
Yep.
And this is a lot like how we talked about focus, about the service provider's job is to help focus. The client makes their expectations known. The service provider should then come back with the reality of those expectations. And again, being honest.
Right.
If they're honest about it, if you want that, it can be achieved, but here's how much it's going to cost you: time, money, effort, focus,
here's
etc.
the downside to doing
exactly.
that. Right.
The pros and cons, and sometimes service providers don't want to give that negative feedback, like that's not viable, or it's going to cost more than your budget, or it's not going to do, and not going to be a fit the timetable you're looking for.
It's not going to work
because
the way you think
because they're
it
afraid
does.
of losing the client.
Right.
But if you don't set realistic expectations up front, you're going to lose that client when it doesn't work out the way they wanted.
Right.
The best time to do that is up front, the initial conversation.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? And
setting expectations.
Setting expectations and an interpretation of those expectations on the provider side. Yep. So like you said, you might have these big, giant, lofty goals. We want to be number one in our industry. We want to gain 50% market share. We want to do $1 million in sales this year. Okay, it's an interesting expectation. Now let's talk about the reality of it. The service provider's job is to bring you back to reality, because the expectations that are expressed and eventually put into an RFP or some sort of document to guide the process, you're going to have to meet at some point. So set those expectations, be honest in the conversation, and then explain how you're going to meet the expectations.
Well, and as a client, as the one seeking the service, you can do yourself and everybody else involved in the process a huge, huge favor by not allowing for mission creep.
Yes.
I want this. Yeah. Okay, but now I want this.
That goes back to where we started with focus.
Focus, absolutely.
All these things go together,
and
right?
Honesty, too.
And honesty. The honesty comes from the provider saying you're getting off your mission. You're getting into creep, and you're getting into alternate ways, and you're diluting your time and effort and budget.
Right.
And so to be honest about meeting any of those expectations, we have to focus on the most impactful, the primary, et cetera, or obtainable. So there's two ways to look at that. The expectation is, of course, we want our businesses to be highly successful, but maybe we start with, client number one, if you're a startup,
right?
The first $10,000, right? If you can't make the first $10,000, you can't make $1 million,
right?
So focus and honesty in the expectation process, but you have to essentially can't go any more forward, and you definitely can't be successful if you don't start with expectations.
Right.
You have to come together and meet on those expectations.
A realistic discussion.
That's right. Else, you have to define success, or else you won't know if you're being successful.
That's right.
Or if you're even moving in the right direction. So, you can set those lofty goals, right? Our first $1 million. That's a great lofty goal. And in some industries, $1 million is going to take you 20 years, and some it's going to take you 3 days.
Right.
Right. Depends. Right. So I can't say it's crazy to say we want to earn $1 million, but you do have to understand if you don't get the first 10,000, you can't get to $1 million. If you're not moving in the right direction, if you're not moving towards goals and objectives,
right,
then you need to change your tactics and strategy, right?
Absolutely.
Setting those expectations allows you to set goals and objectives. It creates a strategy. Then you get the tactical execution. Your measurement comes from all that. All of that process happens because you set expectations and you had an honest, focused conversation about how to meet them.
Yep, absolutely.
If you can do that, if you can meet in the middle, if everything makes sense for the client and for the service provider, you have a relationship.
Yep.
And
that's really important.
You have a potential partnership. The last piece here is the communication.
Yep.
Not only communication at the expectation level, but communication all the way through the process.
Yes.
This is where often both sides can fail at this. I've worked with many clients who fail tremendously at, they get started with so much excitement. There's a ton of communication, a ton of information. We're going to do this rah. And then you're off and running and you don't hear from them again. And the next time you hear from them is, well, damn it, I'm mad. This isn't working.
Right.
It's like, wait, where has the communication been?
Right. Exactly.
And then same thing with your service provider. As you are providing your services, you don't want to necessarily have the client handhold you or micromanage you.
Right.
Because the whole reason that they've hired you is you bring expertise and experience and abilities they don't have to the organization.
That's the bottom line presumption. Absolutely.
But you set yourself up for failure as a service provider if you aren't communicating along the way with check-ins and information, even if it is literally, there's nothing to report yet except that we're working the process. Because the same thing, if you take too long to communicate, then the client is, where am I? Where are we?
Right. And
they get off the expectation that was set and communicated and honestly related back and forth to each other. And they just go back to, look, I haven't made $1 million yet.
Right.
And I haven't heard anything from you, and I'm writing you checks.
Right.
So the communication process throughout. And don't be the client who thinks I'm bothering my service provider, and don't be the service provider who thinks I don't need to be micromanaged by the client.
Right.
It's a relationship. It goes both ways.
Right.
It has to be some ebb and flow, and you have to find the style and meeting expectations again. Not just those big expectations, but the quarterly, monthly, weekly, daily expectations of communication. And we all know business, it's not a straight line, right? Not a path. Like, we're going to do this and then this happens, and it works every time. There's no such thing, right? There will be some adjustments necessary. There will be some forks in the road. We'll make some S-curves, right? We'll have some veering off. We'll have to do some things that we didn't expect at first. The communication of that will allow you to make the right decisions and move forward in a good way, and you end up in a place that is beneficial and profitable and successful, but it doesn't look like what you set out, the expectation you set out.
That's right. Exactly.
If you get there and say, look, we're being successful, and the client goes, no, I wanted this, you're being successful, but you failed the expectation because you haven't communicated through the process.
Right. Exactly.
Then you can't repeat that success and build upon it and make it sustainable because the client doesn't understand why you did what you did.
Right. In fact, when teaching the young professionals of tomorrow in Lindsay and Ass, one of the things that we did very early on was to include in the agreement with the client a communication phrase. How often
just as important as expectations.
Absolutely. How can you expect us to communicate with you? What are our timelines?
Right.
And I think that was an extremely important. Young professionals thought that was a waste of time. Until they got deep into the project and realized this is going to save your butt.
Yes. And this is another place, communication is another way to value add.
Absolutely.
Not just doing the basic communication. We've agreed to daily, weekly, and monthly check-ins.
Right.
We've agreed to providing these kind of reports and this kind of information, but also additional information as it arises, additional education and enlightenment, and bringing in them and making the client part of your process as the provider allows them to be in a relationship with you. It's not simply, we write you checks, you do this,
right?
But we're in this together.
Right.
And the next time you need to make that adjustment that's necessary because the market's pushed back or the things that worked and the things that didn't, and that happens every time, and we know that.
Right.
The conversation about we need to make these changes. We're hoping this, but this is what we're seeing, and we'd like to go in this direction, whether it's we want to change something, we want to add some budget, we want to take some things away, we want to stop doing things we're doing, start doing something different. Whatever that conversation is, if it comes out of the blue, it's a hard conversation.
Right.
If you've been having some of that conversation along the way, you have enlightened your client. They understand where you're coming from, and they almost saw it coming along with you.
Right.
That conversation is very easy. Now, too many service providers get really uptight about, I don't want to teach my clients so they don't need me anymore.
Right.
Wrong attitude,
Your job
folks.
should be to work yourself out of a job.
That's right. so that you can move on to focus B and focus C and focus D. There's 1,000 things that you can do and provide value. The idea that I don't want to teach my client, it's that old web developer model, right? It used to be back in the day, and it still happens these days, but not as much. You hired someone to build your website. Well, they didn't build you your website. They built a website that then they charged you access to.
Right.
So your website was out doing work for you on the internet, but you were having to pay to make updates, and you were having to pay to keep it hosted, and you had no control over it. It was essentially their product that they lent you.
Right.
But you paid them to do it.
Right.
Terrible business model. I hate those business models. I love crushing those things. I love taking those projects away from those old school, we locked you into a contract and you have to pay us every time you want to change a letter on your website, and give that tool back to the business owner who can use it on a regular basis, because it is a tool for business.
Absolutely.
But that model of you have to ask us for permission to run your business is a terrible model. Instead, if you educate and enlighten and communicate with your client, you can then, if they have the ability to manage some of those things on their own, they're still going to need your expertise and your experience, but there are other things you can provide them in addition. So you can actually expand your relationship with a client if you teach them what's happening, if you educate them and you enlighten them and you put them part of the process, if you create a two-way relationship. Yep. Don't be afraid to educate your client. Do not think that your client is going to outgrow you, not need you. And sometimes those things happen anyways. There's lots of reasons to get and lose clients. Right. But don't hold your client back for your benefit as a service provider. And as a client, don't work with service providers who want to hold you back.
Who are proprietary about their information.
Think about that. Yep. And app developers are really bad about this too. They want to charge you for the app development that they own the code to, so that then they turn around and sell that code to someone else. They'll sell the code 100 times over. You think they developed it for you and you paid for that up front. Right. And so there's relationships like that where the service provider is putting themselves first and not the client first. Yep. It should be a 50-50. It's a relationship.
Absolutely.
That leads us right into our last item and our bonus, because it all comes together in a partnership. And I'm talking specifically about a partnership. We've said collaboration earlier, and there's lots of ways to collaborate that are good for everyone to create win-wins, but aren't necessarily always 50-50. Some 60-40, 70-30, right? But everyone walks away feeling good in collaboration. Well, they should.
Right, they should, if it's working right.
A partnership is deeper than simple collaboration. A partnership is more. A partnership is a big, long-term, we're moving forward together and back and forth. And again, learning from each other, benefiting each other, adding value to each other. Right. It should go both ways. The client and the service provider should look at their business relationship as a partnership. When our clients do well, we get opportunities to do more with them.
Right.
So, of course, we want to do everything in our power to make our clients do better.
Right.
That's a win-win. That's a relationship. They're thinking about how to make sales today, this week, this month, this quarter, this year. We're thinking about their brand in the next 5 and 10 years from now, because that's what they hire us for. That's right.
Yep.
So not just win-win collaborations, but creating systems and relationships and processes that are good for everyone on an ongoing basis, that are repeatable. You don't want to be successful once. You want to be successful over and over again. Right. Repeatable and sustainable. Now, what is that? Why is sustainable different than repeatable?
Well, because you can, got me in a corner here.
Just because you can repeat a process doesn't make it profitable and sustainable.
Right.
You need to repeat things that continue to move you in that direction, that continue to do better. You know, it's having set cost and things that you take care of, and then you get your benefit of, your value add, you're up above and beyond. You want to do more of those things, more things that you're paying less for, which creates higher profitability. That becomes sustainable because that profitability you can roll back into your business. You can reinvest time, money, effort, focus back into your business, back into your relationship, if you do things that are repeatable in a sustainable way.
Right.
This is why it's a relationship and a partnership, not simply a business transaction, because transactional or single, and the transaction has a start and finish, and we accomplish this.
Right.
If you have a service provider partnership, as the client, as the provider, if you're both finding ways to not just be transactional or repeatable, but sustainable.
But to make each other better.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's it right there. You make each other better, then it's a rising tide.
Right.
Now a rising tide is lifting all boats. And how long can you keep a client that's being profitable? A lot longer than one that's struggling.
Right. Exactly.
So creating repeatable, sustainable operations, processes in their business. Once it becomes sustainable, it can become dependable. Dependable is, again, where you benefit, they benefit, everyone benefits. It's something that you can plan for, making those investments, reinvestments, right. Whether they're investing their own money from profit or they're going to the bank and asking them for some credit or an injection of funds because your systems, your processes are repeatable, sustainable, and dependable. If they're dependable enough, if you can create a sales cycle that's predictable, if you can create a relationship that you can depend on, you can now bank on it.
Right.
Once it's bankable, once you actually create credit for a business with a bank, with a private lender, with a VC, with an angel, whoever it is, if they can depend on your sales and profitability and ability to repay that and that reinvestment is beneficial, now your business has gone from operating to a whole new level of success. Yep. So you can see we went from startup and helping you figure out the basic idea of what your business should be doing and how you should hire us to do it, to how can we sustain your business to a dependable, bankable level for the next 5, 10, 20, 50, 100 years. That is a partnership.
Yep.
That is a reinvestment of time, effort, etc. That's also the exact opposite of how much can I get paid today, right, and making $1 today and losing tomorrow's $100.
Right.
By focusing on creating partnerships and relationships. And at the end of the day, if you want to be a good client, if you want to be a good service provider, if you are thinking about building a long-term relationship and partnership, as opposed to I hire you, you do this, I write you a check, you go home and leave me alone.
Right.
These
right.
are opposite of each other, right?
Right.
Which would you rather do? Get hired, do it, go away, have to get hired again, or a continual, buildable, dependable relationship?
It takes a lot less effort to maintain a relationship. It's
beneficial for everyone. That's the truest definition of win-win.
Yep.
There you go.
Yep. Bada bing.
Whole lot of information right there, but it's both sides of the equation. How to be a good client, how to be a good service provider, how to meet in the middle and create success for everyone.
Yep.
There's not a limited amount of success. Success is unlimited.
Unlimited.
So, as the client, be open, be honest, communicate, set your expectations, understanding the information from your provider. As the provider, help them focus, set and meet quality expectations that you can actually set and meet. And if you can't, you should not get into a relationship with them. Once you get in that relationship with them, communication both ways. It's a two-way conversation.
Critical.
In developing a true partnership.
Absolutely.
There you go.
Perfect.
There it is, folks.
Nice summation, sir.
I've been thinking about that for a minute. I'm glad that we finally got to put that on the podcast. I think it's a good idea and a good challenge to anyone out there who maybe has as you're the client, think about if you're being a great client. If you're a service provider, are you going far enough
right.
as the service provider? I think everyone could probably do just a little bit better.
Absolutely.
There you go, folks. Thanks for tuning in to the Strategic Growth Podcast again. We appreciate you each and every time. Make sure you hit the like button, subscribe button, leave a comment, leave a review. We'd really appreciate that as well. We'll be back again in 2 weeks with a new episode. Until then, good luck.
Ciao.
Thanks for listening to the Golding Group Strategic Growth Podcast. Make sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. Tell a friend, leave a review, and engage with us on social media. To contact us, please visit thegoldinggroup.com.